This is a bringing back of a species that was here for thousands of years.
It's been several months since the bison relocation in Shageluk. We'll find out how the herd is adapting to their new home. Wild Alaska, a place where people get a front row seat to a Friday night fight. It's rarely seen.
Sponsorship for Frontiers with Rhonda McBride is provided by Kupik Corporation and Spinard Builders Supply. Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our program. From time to time, we'll be doing follow-up Frontier shows to see what's happened since we first reported on something. Now, you might recall one of our shows this spring when we looked at one of the biggest wildlife management projects in state history, a plan 20 years in the making to restore the wood bison to the wild. KTVA's Lauren Maxwell followed the first group of bison that were flown to Shageluk, a tiny community 300 miles west of Anchorage.
The wood bison at the Alaska Wildlife Center in Portage have no idea how special they are.
These animals, or their predecessors to these animals, were almost extinct at one time.
These are the only wood bison in the entire U.S., and pretty soon they'll be making a move that will literally be making history.
This is a bringing back of a species that was here for thousands of years.
Wood bison disappeared from the Alaskan landscape about 200 years ago, and the plan to bring them back is ambitious. 100 bison from the center will move to western Alaska to start a new herd in the wild. But before they do,
The logistical challenges are beyond belief.
they have to get there. Although the project was decades in the making,
These are the pins that hold them in place.
when it finally got the go-ahead, biologists had just 6 months to design the special containers that would carry the bison inside a cargo plane to their new home.
And you figure this is the width of a bison.
30.5 inches is what we've got.
And then only days to practice getting the animals in safely. All the while working to keep them calm and headed in the right direction.
If there's a problem with the behavior of the bison, we have to stop, slow down, and figure it out. All of those things have to fall into place for this to happen.
On moving day, it's clear that practice has paid off. From the box, the truck, and finally the plane. It's a smooth landing on the airstrip in Shageluk. The flight has taken a little over an hour, and biologists are anxious to get the animals out of the containers and onto the pasture land that surrounds the village. One by one, the bison are released to join other members of the herd who arrived earlier. Some seem especially tentative. Others are in a hurry. It's a thrill to watch.
Look, they're here.
Especially for villagers documenting a day they never thought they'd see.
This will be their permanent home.
I know. Can you believe that? Yeah. I can't believe that. It's crazy.
For the next few years, scientists will track the animals using radio collars to see where they go and how they adapt to life in the wild.
They don't know what's good to eat, what's not good to eat, where to go to get it. They don't know where the water sources are, what might eat them and what might not. It's a huge experiment for these guys.
But while the project is sure to yield scientific knowledge, others hope for something more.
Maybe tourists will be coming in and, for economic opportunities.
Arnold Hamilton is one of the 65 people who live in Shageluk, where most homes have no running water and jobs are hard to find. He says many families have moved away.
We're afraid of our school. We're right on the borderline.
Oh.
If a couple students leave, they'll have to shut it down.
So you want more families to be back here.
Well, that's what we want.
And maybe the bison will be a draw.
Maybe, hopefully.
But on this day, at least, there are plenty of people in Shageluk. Families from surrounding villages have traveled hours on snow machine to watch one of the last loads of bison be released.
I think that's wonderful. What a majestic creature.
A new beginning for the herd and a relief for those involved.
I'm in awe. Everything has worked so well, so well.
A project years in the making is getting off to a very good start. For Frontiers, I'm Lauren Maxwell.
And what about those bulls that were left behind? Kathy Harms and Tom Seaton from Fish and Game are here to tell us about their amazing journey to Shageluk by truck and barge. And later, urban wildlife. For moose, it's a yearly ritual, sometimes played out in the neighborhood.
I just want cremation.
No hidden costs, no add-ons.
Cremation is much more affordable.
Dignified, ecological.
I just want something basic. The simpler, the better.
Cremation sure makes a lot of sense. The Cremation Society of Alaska is now serving families in Anchorage and in the Valley, and we are always on the web at alaskacremation.com. Call us today at 277-2777 or in the Valley 373-8627.
We have a story of 27 families that put 18 months of their lives into building a village, a home for themselves and their future. Our Inupiaq culture goes back thousands of years, carried by a strong sense of community. Our relationship with our natural surroundings is at the heart of our culture. By investing in future generations through development that is balanced with the love of our land, the Kupi Corporation brings together traditions of the past with visions of the future.
Look at you. You're at the top of your game. You're unstoppable. Nothing can throw you off track. Wait, is that your car? Uh-oh. Yeah, I saw that coming. That will throw you off track. You're looking at around 10 grand in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. Let's try this again. Smart move. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
We're in Ruby, and it was on the thermometer 22 below. So I go inside, and I say, wow, it's 22 below. And she says, well, that thermometer's off by 6 degrees, so it's about 28. Guy sitting next to her chimes in, he says, well, that's not quite accurate as well, too. He says, you got to take another 7 degrees because you're up here, and so it's really about 35 below. And then someone else comes in and says, yeah, but then when you get the wind coming in, it's another 10 degrees. So he said, so really, a couple hundred yards away, you could be at 45 below. Mushers come in, and they say, gee, my thermometer bottomed out at 65 below. So we went from 22 below to 65 below, like that.
If you think flying 100 animals the size of wood bison was quite a feat, think about getting 3 dozen bulls to Shageluk. Well, that was even bigger as far as challenges go. And joining us to give us an update on the project, Kathy Harms and Tom Seaton with the State Department of Fish and Game. Now, when you were on the show last time, the bulls were about to head up to Shageluk, and that was quite a different project. You didn't fly them, apparently because the bulls are a little bit more to handle. So maybe we could pick up the story from there, because they had to be trucked to Tanana and then barged to Shageluk.
Right, yeah, we trucked them from the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, where we housed all the captive bison, to Nenana, actually, about 300 miles, and then they went about 700 miles down the Tanana, down the Yukon, and then up the Innoko to really close to where we released the cows, and we released them into cow groups so that they would be able to hook up with the rest of the herd.
Well, I imagine that it was quite a project to ship them in containers in a truck, I mean in the summertime.
Mm-hmm. It was really difficult. We didn't have the same squeeze chutes that we had to get the cows into the containers. We had to immobilize the animals.
So you had to drug them?
Yeah, tranquilize them. And once they were mobilized, we pretty much use a large staff of people to get them, and a forklift to get them into the containers. Instead of putting 7 in the containers like we did the adult cows. We only put 3 per container for the adult bulls. We did it twice. We shipped 12 bulls the first time and 18 bulls the second time. But it was a 1,000-mile journey that they went on. It took about 4.5 days.
So 300 for the road trip and then the float down the river. So Kathy, what do you think is so amazing about this journey? I mean, there seem to have been a lot of hurdles along the way.
I keep calling this the project that almost wasn't, for a variety of reasons. And you would think just getting the bulls into the containers and on the truck, everything should be smooth. Well, guess what happened? The sockeye fire was going on both sides of the road just north of Wasilla. So that meant if we couldn't get an escort through the fire, we had to turn right, go across the Glen, up the Richardson, and down the parks to Nenana. And if the trucks stopped and waited, we were having record heat. And the bulls still had winter pelage on, so they were going to overheat. And we could lose them. They could die if we didn't keep the trucks moving. So luckily the state troopers came up and they gave us an escort through the fire, so we didn't have to stop. Then the second trip, we had the escort through the fire again with the 18 bulls. Well, we were traveling during the day instead of the middle of the night, which is the coolest part of the day, so it's warm. And there were at least between 5 and 8 different road construction projects where people were waiting for pilot cars.
So the bulls have to wait just like everybody
No,
else.
if they waited, we would lose some.
Oh,
so we couldn't stop. And luckily, the foremen on the road construction projects were super, super wonderful, and they called a pilot car special for us. I will always remember the looks on the faces of the people who'd been waiting for the pilot car for a half an hour as we drove by with the bison.
So, Tom, how was the river journey?
Oh, it was great. We fed and watered the bison and monitored them 24 hours a day and kept them in good health, and they did a really good job. But
4.5 days.
Yeah, but the thing is, we kind of timed it so that the temperatures wouldn't be too bad, and we ended up with record high temperatures on both trips. And even between the 2 trips, it was cool temperatures. But so we had to really work hard to keep the temperature down in the containers. And so, like when Kathy's talking about them going down the road, it's the ram air ventilation was keeping them ventilated and cooled when we were going down the road. And then we stopped and sprayed water on them fairly regularly. And then when we got them on the barge, they had air conditioning units and shade cloths and things like that. A lot of things we had to do to keep them comfortable.
But it sounds like it was quite a logistical accomplishment. Mm-hmm. Did you prepare for all these contingencies?
Oh yeah, well, every day I got up and thought of what's the worst case scenario that could happen today and what's my plan for dealing with that. And several days it actually turned out to be, several hurdles that we had to overcome, but we did it. You know.
So I guess, can you give us an update on how the herd is doing now? Because, by summer, all 130 were there, males and females. So do they appear to be prospering?
Yes, they really do. They're doing better than our expectations. They're doing very, very well. And so the first 100 were cows and young animals, and the second 30 were adult bulls. And so we released them about a month before breeding season, and they got together, it appears breeding went well, but we won't know until calving next year. We've lost about 19 animals total, including most of those are last spring when a bunch fell through the ice and some died from the stress of making the conversion from captive to a wild environment. And those deaths are a little bit painful to watch, but in some ways they're really a good thing. It's natural selection and process. In captivity, it's hard to know which animals will do great in the wild and which won't. But when you get them out in the wild, nature kind of sorts that out. And what that means is that future generations will be built on the strongest and most fit animals, and that's a good thing.
Let's talk a little bit about the future generations, because these animals came from a herd in Canada, and that herd at one point in the 1950s was very small and has rebounded tremendously. So, what's the prognosis for this herd?
Well, I hope it's going to do quite well. And
how fast do you anticipate it growing if all goes well?
The Canadian populations, there's about 12 wood bison populations in the world now, wild ones that have been reintroduced from that original stock. And the Canadian populations tend to grow at about 20% a year, which is remarkable how fast that is. What it means is that we'll probably have, you know, several hundred bison in 5 to 10 years from now. But it depends a little bit about how they do. We don't really know yet in Western Alaska how they'll do. Right now it looks great. I mean, they've already had 16 new calves this year that were conceived in captivity and born in the wild. And so now next year we should have a whole bunch more that are in the wild.
Well, Kathy, how are their neighbors, the folks in Shageluk, doing?
Tom and other staff members have done a really impressive job of helping people in the villages learn how to act around bison and how to protect people. They've been doing active. They have bison guards who are chosen from the communities, who are trained how to move the bison through town. And the bison are learning. I mean, they blow a whistle and then they haze them, and now when they hear the whistle, they start moving. And I think the people are really not only doing an excellent job as stewards of these animals, but I think they were looking forward to it, and they take a degree of pride in it. The people in that region worked for 10 years to try to get bison to that area. And it's pretty exciting to see them out there. I think a couple of the elders didn't think it would happen, and now they see bison when they're traveling on the rivers and when they're flying to the next village, and it's pretty darn cool.
So I know that these guys have big radio collars, extra tough ones. So have you learned anything so far from that data?
Yeah, we've learned a lot about how they move. You know, we had no idea how they would kind of navigate their landscape. One of the things I've learned is I've been fascinated at how smart they really are about navigating their landscape and how well they know where they're at. At first, when we first turned them out, they spent some time kind of within 10 or 15 miles of the release site, and then they started taking forays way out, you know, 50 miles out, 60 miles out, or even more. And I got worried each time that they would go away and kind of disperse and not make it, but they all came back every time. And so now there's kind of a core area within about 30 miles of Shageluk where most of the bison are. Right now, like just as of last week, it's, you know, a third of the way into the winter, and bison are kind of concentrated on high-quality sedge meadows, and that's what wild wood bison herds do, and they're just making it through the winter just fine.
Well, Kathy, one of the things that people are probably wondering is they're seeing lots of dollar signs and all this monitoring and tracking, especially when we're facing tight budgetary times. Can you tell us a little bit about the cost?
In the future, I think people are going to look back at this as one of the bargains of the millennia. Overall, just the transportation phase was about $750,000. And when you realize some places plan millions of dollars to introduce or to reintroduce a small fraction of what we were able to do. So think about the money and then think about where it came from. In North America, wildlife research and management is paid for primarily by hunting license fees, tag fees, matched to a federal tax on firearms and ammunition called the Pittman-Robertson Fund or the Federal Wildlife Restoration Fund. And we were able to not only do that, but we got some amazing donations that we were able to use for match. For instance, Carlisle donated shipping of feed for years, 6 figures worth of money. Linden discounted their prices on flying the animals by 6 figures. The Safari Club International donated $95,000 and Bass Pro donated $10,000. That $105,000 was used as match 1 to 3 that got us $400,000 to help move it. So this has not come out of general fund. It hasn't come out, nobody in Alaska pays income taxes. It's come out of primarily the tax on firearms and ammunition that shooters and hunters pay, and they belong to all of Alaskans. And if people still want to see them, I gotta give props here to our partner, the Wildlife Conservation Center in Girdwood, took care of these animals, and they still have bison people can see.
Now, just wrapping things up, Tom, I just want to ask you this: is out of all of the projects that you've worked on, why has this one had such staying power, such persistence?
One of the reasons, if we think about what it could be like in the future, 100 years ago there was very few moose or none in Western Alaska, a lot of places in Western Alaska. But you look today at how important moose are in the culture and food supply of people in Western Alaska. Well, if we think forward 100 years from now, perhaps bison will be just as important part as moose are today in Western Alaska for humans, and that's pretty exciting for most people.
That is an exciting image to hold. Thanks very much, Kathy Harms and Tom Seaton, for joining us. Wild Alaska. Photojournalist John Thane was in the thick of it last fall in search of moose courtships, plus a showdown captured on camera. We revisit an Anchorage neighborhood where a father and son witnessed a fight to remember.
The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium provides comprehensive health services for Alaska Native and American Indian people across our state. In addition to world-class care at the Alaska Native Medical Center, our work delivers health services for rural Alaska. From cutting-edge technology for the best care possible, to modern construction of clean water systems and health clinics, to health training and outreach that honors our culture, our vision is that Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world.
People feel like they're a burden on their friends, on their family. They're struggling and they need somebody right now.
Those who are suicidal feel like if they were gone, no one would care. Let them know that you care, and so do a lot of others.
Realistically, the only wrong thing that you can say is nothing. Saying nothing at all.
You could save a life, no experience necessary. For support, go to StopSuicideAlaska.org.
Get caught buzzed driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig, knock it off.
Sorry, Mom. It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzz driving is drunk driving.
We know that you have a spy in my inner circle.
Please, get me out!
It just got real complicated. We had to think of the greater good.
A new Madam Secretary, then.
I don't know why I'm telling you this, Alicia.
Eli.
I'm sorry.
A new Good Wife after Madam Secretary, CBS tonight.
It was an only in Alaska moment. Two bull moose duked it out at a South Anchorage subdivision. A father and son were in the right place at the right time to capture the action, and KTVA's Sierra Starks had a chance to get their reaction.
It was a bonding moment for this father and son, front row seats to a Friday night fight.
And all of a sudden, these two guys just started going at it.
Those guys were two bull moose, duking it out at the peak of rut season. Fighting over a girl, naturally.
It was crazy. It was like something right out of Alaska, what you expect. I had actually seen this in the wild, 100 yards away in binoculars.
But Bill Tyra never expected to see the action this close to his South Anchorage home.
And they were literally about 8 to 10 feet from us at one point.
It started in a neighbor's driveway.
And so we were right up in here in the edge. There was a car sitting here, so we were behind the car. And I'm filming the video behind the car.
But as the brawl spills onto the street, Bill and his son run for safety.
I filmed a lot of that video from about right here.
Just 10 feet away from more than 1,000 pounds of Alaska-grown moose in each corner, antlers swinging as the rumble continues.
That's where the front row was, right there.
There's like hair flying everywhere, and one was just like carrying the other one all the way across the street.
One bull moose finally gets the upper hand, and it's clear the fight is coming to an end.
And he was ready to flip the other guy over again, and they separated approximately right here in the street. Then the one ran down the street, and the winner kind of stood here in the street, kind of, I'm the victor, we are the champions kind of thing.
It was a matchup to remember, and a moment too good not to share.
And a lot of people are just amazed, as I was, but, I got to watch it for real, and they get to live through my video.
On social media, secondhand spectators weighed in on the only in Alaska moment. One commenter rated the fight as more entertaining than Mayweather versus Pacquiao. Also on Facebook, Peg Redding commented, "Boys will be boys." And on Twitter, @AlaskaTracy retweeted the video with hashtag never a dull moment in this great state. Back in Bill's neighborhood, the moose are long gone, but they certainly left their mark.
You can see the gouge marks where it happened.
There's moose hair everywhere, and the bystanding car, it caught a few blows. That's hoping for another brawl anytime next Friday night, or?
That would be great.
But Bill says that's okay. He and Josh have had enough up-close action to carry them until next rut season. For For Frontiers, I'm Sierra Starks.
Well, sometimes you don't have to travel very far out of town to find the drama of moose courtship. Photojournalist John Thane went to Glen Alps near the Anchorage hillside, where one bull moose made his moves.
It's the big moose party every fall. No hunters up here, so the moose don't run away, and they're pretty tame. My name is Brad Bodie, and I'm out here looking for moose. I usually get a couple of small young ones in here, or cows right around the parking lot, but you don't usually see bulls here. Oh, there's a bull chasing a cow right on the trail. This is a great day. Catch a couple in the parking lot. Oh, a little snow in your mouth. That's interesting. Eating snow. There's probably a bigger one in the bush. It's always pretty nice when I come up here. Pick those days. We're gonna start get the sunlight streaming through this valley, so we gotta get on the other side of the moose, so the light's behind us. We're gonna get a lot. There's 2 more moose over by the telephone post over there. Hear them? I'm gonna go across this bridge and then cut through the swamp a little bit and see if I can get over in that brush where that other moose is. It's a wonderful place to be. Get to watch the sunrise streaming down. Beautiful mountains. It's always very pretty. There's a small bull working along the edge over here. We might get the dominant bull here to stand up. Uh-oh. He's getting up. He's getting up. Here he comes. Yeah, he's gonna definitely drive this young bull off. He is protecting his territory here and his cows. A lot of the ones around Anchorage let you get really close, but when they're protective like this one is, you definitely have to respect this. This is my annual moose hunt.
Oh boy, well, whether in urban or rural Alaska, nature is never very far away. Well, we hope that this program has given you an appreciation of that. Thanks for joining the conversation. We'll see you next week.